Who
Thank
will
you.
give?
Yeah, thank you all. I don't have a presentation to, so I'll be just talking to you. I have sent you through the chat my full paper with the full length of it and with all the
Okay,
references
right.
and with the, so you can, at your spare time, you can read through the paper itself. And I'll not, I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'll just be talking to you about my paper, try to present the core of it and the major points in it. But let me first extend my gratitude, my thanks to the organizers, to Professor Adnan Aslan for the opportunity to be here with you. And I would like also to acknowledge my partner, Professor Daniel Statman from the Haifa University, with whom I share many of the insights developed in this presentation, and with whom I cooperate in leading the From the Wells educational program as academic co-advisors through the Hartman Foundations. And maybe I'll start with the idea. What do we mean by from the wells? You know, this is a metaphor. It's a metaphor that signifies the idea that we have shared common places, that we have shared sources, that one can drink and nourish from, shelter, whisper, and even cry within these wells. And a lot of wisdom is coming from these wells. من الآبار in Arabic. In Hebrew, من بئرات, من الآبار in Arabic. So from the wells. And it's the idea that I mean these wells needs to be searched for. We need to search for these wells, but also we need to be vigilant, and we need to approach this very carefully, as some of these wells are clean and have healthy water, but many of these are also, you know, poisoned and have deadly water. I mean, deadly water of extremism and radicalization. So we gave this metaphor as the title of this project, which is really aims to support Jewish and Arab educators in Israel in addressing racism, segregation, and prejudice in Israel. And I'm talking about Israel within, not in the green, not in the occupied territories of 67, not the Palestinians who lived in Gaza or lived in the West Banks, but the Palestinians, Arab Palestinians who live within the state of Israel, and they have the status of being Israeli citizens of Israel. So the idea to support Jewish and Arab educators and to train them as how to teach culture and tradition in a more humanistic, inclusive, and critical way. So let me say a few words on the context in which these educators are working in, and I'll start by just making to clarifying that Palestinian citizens of Israel are Arab residents of the mandatory Palestine who remained within Israel's borders following the 1948 war and the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948. In 2019, their official number was about 1,600,000 people. These are roughly 20% of the Israeli population. So every fifth person in Israel is actually an Arab. Most of them are Muslim. 82 are Muslims, 9% are Druze, and around 9% are Christians. Now, I will not go into details as to show the extent to which this minority is exposed to discrimination, because a variety of academic studies, governmental reports, civil society reviews, media coverage highlight the discrimination that affects this homeland national minority in Israel in almost all socio-economic indicators, including in education. And I mean, at least in the education systems, and one can say with much confidence, and it's safe to argue that the education system that serves this minority suffers from unequal allocation of state resources, lack of recognition of the Palestinian culture in the curriculum, and the reduction of the Arab leadership's influence on education policy. So we start. I mean, this is the context. Now in Israel, this is very, it's discussions are always heated. The discussions are always confluential. It's and in many and since many Jewish and Muslim political movements formulate their visions and demands in religious language, and this is what we call the religification of the Israeli public sphere, and many conceptions of homeland, peoplehood, sovereignty, governance are often framed through theological frameworks, through religious language. And it's the same, also Muslims do the same, also, Jews do the same, using this religious language when they formulate their visions or their political demands. This is why, we thought when we initiated this project through the Hartman's Foundation, it's very critical that Jews and Arabs engage with foundational texts of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It is very important to engage with foundational texts from these from the three traditions, to encounter, and to start deliberating on this religious language, which is now dominating the public sphere. And also, it's very important to realize that segregation, which is, the segregated nature of the Israeli society, including in education, it is really could be a fertile soil for the development of prejudice and negative feelings of one group towards each other. This is why, the idea of from the wells to bring Jewish and Arab educators, to bring them together in a sustainable encounter. And we started with this idea that, to make a real impact on society, it is necessary to work with agents of change for a significant period. And what we have identified as our agents of change were the principles and teachers of history, civics, religion, and tradition. This is the targeted population of this project, with the ambition that we want to transform how these school subjects are instructed, are pedagogized within at the classroom level. So we bring, mixed groups of Arab and Jewish educators that they meet approximately 10 to 12 times a year for 5 to 6 hours each time, besides to a couple of field studies at the community level to churches, synagogues, and masajid. And the leading pedagogy is actually textual reasoning. I'm not saying, we know from the literature the idea of scriptural reasoning, and now we go beyond scripture reasoning. We go to this idea of textual reasoning because we convene these educators not to talk only about, you know, the scriptures, their scriptures, but rather about foundational texts. This could be philosophical text, fiction, literature, you know, religious texts, theology, really a wide variety of texts that, you know, we bring speakers to introduce these texts. For example, you know, Jews and Arabs will be reading Al-Ghazali, you know, Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, the deliverance from the error, like a significant extraction of it. Maybe the opening 3-4 pages of the Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, the deliverance from error. Or they could be, you know, Hayy ibn Yaqdan, ibn al-Tufail. So they would be reading, you know, the end of it, you know, like the story of Asal and Salman, and when they meet on this remote island. So and it's always the materials are in Arabic and in Hebrew. So they would be each will be reading in his own language, and they would come together after a speaker is introducing this text or the story of Yusuf, you know, Surah Yusuf from the Quran al-Karim. And then after introducing, speakers could be academics, could be religious, you know, leaders. And after these texts are introduced, they would convene and discuss these texts around guiding questions. So it would be, this is the first part of the meeting. And the second part of the meeting, it would be, okay, now, how we translate this, how we can take this into our classrooms. What is the relevance of this text to our professional practice? What is the relevance of these texts to the sociopolitical realities in Israel? So Al-Ghazali becomes, you know, relevant, and Ibn Tufail becomes relevant, or, you know, the idea of the virtuous city of Al-Farabi, you know, reading, you know, this lists of who is what is a virtuous city, or who is a true leader, you know. This would be a way to start, you know, talking about issues of equality, of leadership, of dialogue, of reflexivity. What does it mean to be critical within your own tradition? Now, we realize that participants, you know, it is really very interesting, because, you know, most of the Jewish Israeli participants were mostly secular. But these developed, I would say, after the program, a more sensitive, more approach to their tradition. I mean, though they are secular, they developed a more sensitive, more, you know, inspirational approach to their tradition. While the Palestinian, the Arab participants, and this could be Muslims and Christians, become more critical, become more reflective, you know, become more asking more questions. So it's very interesting to see how each group is mediating its own religiosity through the encounter with the Arab. And for me, what was really very surprising, that the program actually exposed the shortcomings of the Islamic education in Israel. I mean, the Israeli education, Islamic education in Israel is taught as generic, monolithic, and ahistorical religion. And for the educators who are participating in this project, all of a sudden, you know, they are now provided with the opportunity to learn more about denominational differences, to learn about intellectual debates in Islamic theology and jurisprudence, and to go beyond literal interpretations, to adopt hermeneutics as a way of teaching, as a way of exploring, you know, issues of belief and issues of that relates to their belief in Islam. Now, it's how many time is left for me? Excuse me, what time is left for me?
You have 5 minutes.
Excellent. So, and now, in many cases, we were all the time, challenged that we need to ground this idea of dialogue within Islam. I mean, it could be you have different approaches to this. One approach would say like dialogue is important, and then you could refer to Freire or whatever, to reason for this dialogue between these traditions. But to reason this dialogue from within Islamic, with an Islamic perspective, I mean, to tackle the questions whether, is it permissible for a Muslim to read a Jewish and Christian religious texts? Is it permissible for a Muslim to translate from them? Is it permissible for a Muslim to question and to consult with Jews and Christians in searching for a meaning and significance of Islamic religious texts? I mean, there are traditions that oppose such such stances or such beliefs, that would go and oppose and say, no, you can't do this, And so in many places, we try to really to theorize from within. I can, in my full paper, I give, like a full references as how we theorize this dialogue from within in Judaism, and this was the part written by my colleague Professor Daniel Statman, and to theorize from within from an Islamic perspective. And what I gave is just an example of Israeliyat, which is like the stories, the biblical stories which exist in tafsir, and how we should relate to this Israeliyat. And the different approaches to Israeliyat as a way to acknowledge that there is a spectrum of approaches. The way we treat Israeliyat and just in brief, Israeliyat refers to the traditions and reports that contains elements of the legendary religious literature of the Jews, but also Christians and even Near Eastern, elements. So, how you approach Israeliyat, it is a way also to ground the idea that dialogue is possible. Now, there are many limitations for this project. I don't want to go into the details, but it is very important that now it is more clear for us that, the more you work with agents of change, the more you have extended sessions with ample of time for participants to talk, study, and get to know each other. And also, and this is very important, to reserve issues related to the Jewish-Arab conflict, addressing them only after trust has been established. We go and talk about, this foundational text, and always at the background, there is the idea of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or the issue, but we want to reserve, we want to bracket this, we want to cover this for a while. After trust is built, after we will come to this in the second year, and it's a program for 2 years. So the first year is really about studying foundational texts and building this mutual trust, and then we would come back to discuss issues that relates to the Palestinian Israeli. Now, really, I could tell more, but at these times in Israel, where is extremism, populism, and this rising power of the extreme right in Israel, this right tides of, politics of fear, politics of hatred, really encouraged by the current government, the idea that this Jewish foundation called Hartman's foundation insist in bringing together Arabs and Jews to study foundational texts, it's not to be taken for granted. And it's something that, should be with full appreciation and they have a mind. Thank you.